Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered from the void, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I was 20 years old in the late 1970s, and before everything happened, our village was the kind of place people only believed existed in paintings. It sat between green hills, with little streams running through it like silver threads. In spring, flowers grew wild along the paths, and in summer, the fields glowed under the sun. The air smelled of wet grass, bread, wood smoke, and fresh soil. Everyone knew everyone. Doors were left open during the day. Children ran between houses without fear. Women called to one another from gardens. Men gathered in the square after work and drank tea while talking about crops, weather, and old stories. It was peaceful, maybe too peaceful. I remember people smiling often. Not fake smiles, not polite smiles, but real ones. People helped each other without being asked. If someone was sick, food appeared at their door. If someone's fence broke, 3 men came to fix it before sunset. If someone had a wedding, the whole village celebrated. It felt like we belonged to one another. But then he came. A man moved into an old house near the edge of the village, a house that had already been empty for years. It stood a little apart from the others, close to the road that led toward the hills. At first, people were curious about him. New people did not often come to our village. We thought maybe he was a widower, or a man looking for quiet, or someone who had inherited the property from distant relatives. We were wrong. From the beginning, there was something wrong with him. He did not greet anyone. He did not smile. He did not visit the market unless he had to, and when he did, he moved quickly with his head down and his eyes full of anger. If someone tried to speak to him, he cursed at them. If children came too close to his house, he shouted until they ran away crying. Soon, people started whispering that he practiced witchcraft. At first, I thought it was just village talk. People in small places like ours often turn strangers into monsters because they do not know what else to do with them. But then the screams began. They came from his house at night. Not every night, but often enough. Long, terrible screams that cut through the darkness and woke people from sleep. Sometimes they sounded like a woman, sometimes like an animal, sometimes like a man being tortured. Lights would flicker in his windows, strange colors, not yellow like lamp oil, but reddish and blue, like fire burning underwater. No one wanted to approach his house. My father said we should leave him alone, that men who invite darkness into their homes should not be disturbed unless you are ready to face what answers the door. My mother crossed herself whenever his name was mentioned. For a while, the darkness stayed inside his house. Then it began to spread. It started with stones thrown at windows after midnight. Small stones at first, tapping against glass like someone asking to be let in. Then larger ones striking hard enough to crack panes. People would rush to the window and see no one outside. Then came the voices. Neighbors said they heard someone calling their names from beyond their doors. A child's voice. A dead relative's voice. Sometimes their own voice. One woman swore she heard her husband calling from the yard, begging her to open the door even though he was asleep beside her the whole time. Another family woke to find muddy handprints on every window of their house, though there had been no rain for weeks. A farmer found his cow dead in the field with its eyes missing and its tongue pulled out. Another man said something followed him home from the well, walking behind him with too many feet. Within a few weeks, the entire village changed. People stopped smiling. Children no longer played outside after dusk. Women brought laundry in before sunset. Men who once laughed in the square now hurried home with fear on their faces. Every night, we locked our doors, shut our shutters, and waited. I was too frightened to go to the outhouse after dark. That may sound small, but it tells you what kind of fear lived among us. I was 20 years old enough to consider myself a man, but I would sit inside holding my breath rather than step into the yard at night, because I could hear things walking outside, not people. Things. Sometimes they moved slowly past the front door, dragging something behind them. Sometimes they circled the house. Sometimes they stood under the windows and threw pebbles at the glass for hours. Tap, tap, tap. My father sat near the window with his shotgun across his knees. I can still see him there, his face pale in the lantern light, his hands trembling even though he tried to hide it. My mother sat beside the stove and prayed under her breath until morning. No one slept anymore. We only waited for dawn. Our beautiful village had become a prison. Finally, one afternoon, the men of the village gathered together. Fear had turned into anger, and anger needed somewhere to go. They decided enough was enough. The stranger had brought this curse upon us, and he would answer for it. Almost the whole village marched to his house. I went too, though my legs shook the entire way. When we reached the house, the door was locked. The windows were covered from inside. Men shouted for him to come out. No answer came. Eventually, they forced the door open and searched the place. He was not there, but the inside of the house was worse than anything we imagined. The walls were covered with strange markings, drawn in ash, blood, and something black that smelled like rot. There were circles on the floor, burnt candles melted into piles, jars filled with things floating in cloudy liquid, and bundles of hair tied with red thread. In one room, dead birds hung upside down from the ceiling. No one touched anything. We backed out of the house before sunset. Then, just as evening began to fall, the man appeared. He came from somewhere behind the house, stumbling like a drunk. But when he stepped into the road, no one spoke. His face was swollen, his lips were split. Both of his eyes were black and bruised, as if someone had beaten him nearly to death. His clothes were torn, and he looked nothing like the angry man who had cursed us for months. He looked terrified. That frightened us more than his anger ever had. He raised his hands and begged us to listen. He said the things he had called were stronger than he expected. He said they wanted the village, not just his house, the whole village. He said they had already chosen it, already marked it, already begun to cross over. He told us that if we refused them, they would not let anyone sleep that night. Not one person. He said they would torment us until madness took every home. They would throw stones, whisper names, break windows, drag people into the dark. They would keep coming until we either submitted or fled. But he said running would not save us now. He told us there had to be a ritual. That night was the second full moon of the year. He said that meant something to them. He said they would descend upon the village after midnight, and every person had to stand outside their home dressed entirely in black. No lamps, no weapons, no prayers spoken aloud. Only black clothing and bowed heads. There was one rule above all others. We were not to look at them. Not even once. He said if anyone raised their head and made eye contact, that person would cross into their realm and never return. After saying this, the man ran. He did not wait for questions. He did not ask forgiveness. He turned and fled down the road like something was already chasing him. Within moments, he vanished into the dark beyond the village. That was when I understood. Even the man who had brought those things here could no longer face them. My father later explained the ritual to my mother in a low voice, thinking I could not hear. He said it was not a prayer, it was not protection. It was an oath of submission, a ceremony where we admitted they existed and bowed before them. They wanted our village to acknowledge them. They wanted us to give in. No one had the courage to refuse. By then, night had fully fallen. The moon rose above the hills, large and pale, and the village seemed to shrink beneath its light. We dressed in black. My mother wrapped a black shawl around her head. My father wore his old black coat. I wore dark trousers and a black shirt. I remember my fingers shaking so badly I could barely button it. Just before midnight, we stepped outside. I will never forget what I saw. The entire village stood in front of their homes, dressed in black from head to toe. Their faces looked white under the moonlight. Some were crying silently. Some held hands. Some trembled so badly they could barely stand. Children clung to their mothers. Old men stared at the ground with tears running down their cheeks. Only a few weeks earlier, those same faces had been full of laughter. Now we looked like people waiting to be sacrificed. My mother held the other. I could feel both of them shaking. No one spoke. No one dared. Then, from the entrance of the village, we heard the first sound. A hum. Not music at first. Not speech, either. More like the sound of a huge crowd murmuring far away. Many voices speaking together, too many to understand. The sound rolled slowly toward us along the road. My father leaned close to me and whispered sharply, "Keep your eyes on the ground." I obeyed. I stared at the dirt near my shoes. The hum grew louder. My heart pounded so hard that I could hear it in my ears. My knees felt weak. My whole body ached from trying not to move. As the sound came closer, something else joined it. Music. But not music made by any instrument I knew. It was a thin, wheezing sound, sharp and scraping like bone being dragged across bone. It rose and fell in a rhythm that made my teeth hurt. It sounded like a flute made from something alive, something suffering. The first shadow passed it across the ground, long and twisted. I kept my eyes down, but even the shadow was enough to make my stomach turn. It was shaped almost like a person, but not quite. Its neck bent at an impossible angle. Its back rose in a hump, but the hump moved as if another living thing was riding inside it or growing from it. Then, more shadows came. Tall ones, bent ones with arms too long. Shapes that walked like people, but were not people. The procession had entered the village. The sound of horses followed, but not the clean clatter of hooves. These steps were wet and heavy like slabs of meat slapping against the earth. Their shadows stretched across the dust, huge and crooked, with legs too thin and heads too long. The smell arrived next. Damp earth. Old tombs, rot sealed away for 100 years and suddenly opened. It was sweet and sickening, so strong that I gagged but did not dare make a sound. The music grew louder as they passed beside us. That horrible pipe-like wail crawled inside my head. It felt like it was being played inside my skull. Around me, even the quiet sobs stopped. The whole village seemed to hold its breath. Then I saw the bride's shadow. I did not mean to look. I kept my eyes on the ground, just as my father told me. But her shadow fell across the dirt in front of us. It was white. I know that makes no sense. Shadows are dark. That is what shadows are. But her veil cast a white shadow on the ground, bright and pale beneath the moon. It moved like cloth underwater. For a moment, I thought I could see the outline of her face inside it, as if the shadow was not a shadow at all, but the true thing passing over the earth. My father's hand turned cold in mine, not cold like death. The procession continued. I do not know how long it lasted. Time became strange. The hum, the music, the wet footsteps, the smell, the shadows, all of it seemed endless. It felt as if the entire night had become one long breath we were not allowed to release. Once, a child whimpered somewhere across the square. Immediately, the music stopped. Every person in the village froze. Something moved close to the child's house. I heard soft, dragging steps. I heard the child's mother begin to cry, but even she did not raise her voice. Then, the music began again. The child did not make another sound. Until the first hint of dawn, they moved through our village. When morning light finally touched the sky, the smell began to fade. The hum retreated toward the village entrance. The shadows thinned and vanished. The music grew softer until it sounded like wind through dead grass. No one moved for a long time. Then, one by one, people turned and went back into their homes. No one looked at each other. No one asked what anyone had seen. No one said it was over. Those white shadows had not gone away. They had only become invisible again. The moment my father stepped into our house, he threw his old wooden suitcase onto the bed. My mother began gathering whatever she could find: copper pots, bread, clothes, a small bag of coins. Her hands shook so badly she dropped things more than once. I stood there watching, still feeling the cold of my father's hand in mine. "Where are we going?" I asked. My father stopped. He looked out the window toward the square, toward the empty house of the witch man. There was something hollow in his eyes, something I had never seen before. "I don't know," he said quietly. "We have nowhere to go." His voice trembled. "But we have no soul left to stay here." We loaded what little we could onto the back of the tractor and drove toward the village exit. As we left, I looked back. Others were doing the same. Some families left on ox carts. Some walked with bundles on their backs. Some climbed into old trucks. Some carried children still too tired or frightened to walk. Everyone was leaving. By sunrise, the village was empty. Our paradise had become a graveyard overnight. We never went back. Years passed. We heard rumors from time to time. Some said the road to the village became blocked by fallen trees and stones. Some said the houses collapsed quickly, as if decades of rot had taken them in months. Some said people who tried to go there at night fled screaming before reaching the square. After the whole village emptied, newspapers wrote about us. They called it the Cursed Village. Others called it mass hysteria. Experts said we were simple people who believed too strongly in superstition. They said fear spread from person to person until we all imagined the same thing. Maybe that explanation comforted people in cities. It did not comfort us, because all of us had seen the white shadows. I am an old man now. My hands shake too much to write for long, so I am dictating this to my son. I want someone to remember what happened. I want someone to remember that our village was once beautiful, that we were once happy there, that streams ran through green fields and people smiled without fear. I want someone to know that we did not leave because of madness. We left because something came. Because one man opened a door he could not close because they claimed our home. And once they did, we understood something no newspaper, priest, doctor, or expert could ever explain. Some places are not haunted by the dead. Some places are taken by things that were never alive at all. Story 2. I think I might be going insane. I don't mean that in the dramatic way people say it when they lose their keys or forget why they walked into a room. I mean, I am genuinely starting to question whether something is wrong with my mind. Something deep. Something that has been sitting quietly inside me for a long time and has finally decided to show itself through the one thing I used to trust most: my reflection. At first, it was small enough that I could ignore it. Small enough that I could convince myself I was tired or stressed or getting sick. You know that strange feeling you get in a funhouse when you stand in front of those warped mirrors and watch your body stretch too tall, then shrink too short, then bend in ways a body should never bend? There is a sick little twist that happens in your stomach when your brain recognizes your face but also knows something is wrong with it. That was how it started. I was getting ready one morning, standing in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. Nothing special, just the normal routine. I had work later, so I was trying to make myself look more awake than I felt. I remember leaning closer to check my face, and that was when I noticed my nose looked strange. Not huge, not obviously deformed, just wrong. The shape seemed slightly off, like the bridge was thinner than usual or the tip sat at a different angle. I stared at it for a long time, turning my face left and right. At first, I thought maybe the lighting in the room was making shadows look weird. Then I wondered if I had accidentally put blush across my nose or contoured it without thinking. But I hadn't. I don't usually contour my nose anyway. I barely have the patience for makeup most mornings. Still, There it was, sitting in the center of my face, familiar enough to belong to me, but strange enough to make me uncomfortable. I touched it. That was the first thing I did. I ran one finger slowly down the bridge of my nose while watching my reflection do the same. It copied me perfectly. No delay. No strange movement. Nothing dramatic. It's fine, I told myself softly. You're probably getting sick. I kept saying that while pressing my fingers against my face, trying to feel if anything was swollen. Maybe my sinuses were acting up. Maybe I had slept with my face pressed into the pillow too hard. Maybe I was just looking at myself too closely. That explanation worked for a little while. The human brain is good at protecting itself from things it doesn't want to understand. It offers little excuses like bandages. You accept them because the alternative is too big to handle. So I left the room, went about my day, and tried not to think about it. But I did think about it. All day, at work, while people spoke to me, my mind kept drifting back to that mirror. I found myself touching my nose without realizing it. I checked my reflection in dark windows and my phone screen, but everything looked normal there. That was what confused me most. My face looked fine in small reflections. Bathroom faucets, my phone, the black screen of my laptop. It was only the full-body mirror that had shown something wrong. By the next morning, I had almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. Then I looked in the mirror again. This time it was my eyes. I had slept well that night. Better than usual, actually. I woke up feeling rested and calm. For once, I didn't hit snooze 6 times or lie in bed scrolling until I hated myself. I got up, stretched, and walked to the mirror with a cup of coffee in my hand. Then I saw my eyes. In the reflection, they were bloodshot. Not just a little red from dryness. They were violently red, filled with thin, branching veins that crawled across the whites like cracks in glass. The skin under them looked bruised, darker than it should have been. I leaned closer, feeling my pulse quicken. That wasn't right. I touched the skin under my eyes. It felt normal. My eyes didn't burn, they didn't feel dry, they weren't watering. I didn't feel sick. I felt completely fine. But the reflection looked awful. Exhausted, almost diseased. I blinked hard and rubbed my eyes. My reflection did the same. When I looked again, they were still red. No, I whispered. That's not right. I grabbed my phone and opened the front camera. Normal. My eyes looked normal. A little tired, maybe, but nothing like the mirror. I stared at the phone, then back at the full-length mirror. In the phone, I looked like myself. In the mirror, I looked like someone who had been crying for days or hadn't slept in a week. My mouth went dry. You're tricking yourself again, I said. You look fine. I actually laughed after saying it because hearing myself speak out loud made me feel ridiculous. People see strange things when they're anxious. People get fixated on tiny details in their appearance all the time. Maybe this was just some new, ugly form of insecurity my brain had decided to create. So I did what I had done the day before. I poked and pulled at my face. I checked my eyelids, my cheeks, my nose again. I looked for swelling, redness, scratches, anything that could explain what I was seeing. Every time I checked in my compact mirror or phone camera, everything looked normal. That became the pattern. Small mirrors were fine. My compact mirror, the one I kept in my bag, always showed me clearly. My face looked normal there. Even the bathroom mirror at work, which only showed me from the waist up, looked mostly fine. The full-body mirrors were the problem. And once I realized that, I started avoiding them. That should have been easy. Most people don't need to look in a full-length mirror constantly. But once you're trying not to look at something, it becomes almost impossible not to notice it. My bedroom mirror stood against the wall near the closet. I had placed it there years ago because the room was small and it made the space feel bigger. Now it felt like an open door. Every time I passed it, my eyes wanted to flick toward the glass. I started covering it with a sheet at night. That helped for a while. Or at least I told myself it did. The next few days were strange but manageable. I stopped getting ready in my bedroom. I used the small mirror on my vanity instead. I brushed my hair while sitting down. I checked my outfit in reflections from windows instead of standing in front of the full mirror. Still, I felt watched. That sounds stupid because a mirror doesn't watch you. It reflects you. That's all. It has no thoughts, no hunger, no intention. But I could feel it in the room behind the sheet, waiting. I tried to talk myself out of it constantly. You're stressed. You're tired. You saw one weird thing and now your brain is building a story around it. That is what fear does. It gathers small moments and ties them together until they look like proof. Then this morning happened. I woke up feeling normal. Not great, not bad, just normal. I had almost convinced myself that if I kept ignoring the mirror, whatever strange fixation I had developed would fade away on its own. I walked into the bathroom half asleep, turned on the tap, and started brushing my teeth. Our bathroom has a tall mirror mounted above the sink. It isn't technically full length, but it is large. Large enough to show my whole upper body, the door behind me, and a narrow slice of the hallway if it's open. I had been using it without any problem for days. Maybe because I never looked too closely. That morning I was brushing my teeth and staring down into the sink, watching white foam swirl around the drain. I remember thinking about coffee. I remember wondering if I had enough time to wash my hair. Ordinary thoughts. Safe thoughts. Then I looked up. Blood poured from my mouth in the mirror. I froze with the toothbrush still between my lips. My reflection stood there staring back at me, toothpaste and blood dripping down its chin in thick red streaks. Its lips were stretched into a smile that I was not making. The smile was wide and calm, almost pleased. Its teeth were broken and uneven with dark gaps where some had fallen out. Then I saw teeth drop into the sink. In the reflection, they hit the porcelain one by one, but I heard nothing. No clatter, no tiny hard sound, nothing. I looked down at the real sink in front of me. Only toothpaste. No blood, no teeth. I looked back up. The reflection was still smiling. My actual mouth had gone numb around the toothbrush. I slowly pulled it out and touched my teeth with my tongue. All there. No blood. But in the mirror, my reflection opened its mouth wider, letting more red foam spill down its chin. It looked delighted, like it wanted me to see. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall behind me. That was when its hand moved. Not mine, its hand. It lifted slowly toward the mirror from the other side. I was standing with my hands at my sides. I know I was. But the reflection raised one bloody hand and pressed its fingers against the glass. Then it dragged them downward. The sound came through perfectly. A horrible scratching noise, sharp and high, like nails on a chalkboard. My nails. In the reflection, the nails on its fingers were peeling backward from the tips. The skin beneath them was raw and bloody. As the fingers slid down the glass, the nails bent back farther, exposing red flesh underneath. Blood oozed down its hand, thick and dark. The smile never changed. It kept staring at me with my face, with my ruined eyes, with my broken, bloody mouth. And it smiled like all of this was normal. That was when I screamed. I don't remember dropping the toothbrush, but I must have. I don't remember turning off the tap either. I just remember running. I tore out of the bathroom so fast that my shoulder slammed into the doorframe. I grabbed my keys from the counter without shoes, without a coat, without thinking, and ran outside. I made it to my car and locked the doors. Now I'm sitting here in the driver's seat, typing this with shaking hands. My phone says it has only been 20 minutes, but it feels longer. The house looks normal from the driveway. Curtains still. Front door closed. Morning light on the windows. Nothing moving inside, but I know the bathroom mirror is in there. I know it's waiting. I keep telling myself there has to be an explanation. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe carbon monoxide. Maybe some mental health issue finally showing itself. Maybe I should call someone. A doctor. A friend. My mother or the police, though I have no idea what I would say. There is something wrong with my mirror. That sounds insane. I tried checking my face in the car mirror a few minutes ago. That was a mistake. For 1 second, everything looked normal. Then my reflection blinked too late. Just a fraction of a second. Not enough that anyone else would notice, maybe. But I noticed. I covered the mirror with an old receipt and haven't looked again. I don't know what it wants from me. That is the part I can't stop thinking about. If it wanted to scare me, it worked. If it wanted me out of the house, I left. If it wanted me to look at it, I already did. So what now? What does a reflection want when it stops being yours? I keep remembering the first day when only my nose looked wrong. Then my eyes. Then my mouth, my teeth, my hands. It feels like it was testing pieces of me, learning my face, practicing how to wear it. Maybe that is why small mirrors still look normal at first. Maybe it needed bigger glass, more room, a full shape. Maybe it has been trying to build itself out of me one feature at a time. I want to believe I am having some kind of breakdown. I truly do. Because if I am losing my mind, then at least the horror is inside me. At least there are doctors and medicine and explanations. But if I'm not insane, then something is inside my house wearing my reflection like a mask. And I have no idea what happens if it finally gets the whole thing right. I keep staring at the front door from my car. A few minutes ago, I thought I saw movement behind the small window near the hallway. Just a shadow, just for a second. It could have been anything. But now my phone screen has gone dark twice while I've been typing, and both times I caught my reflection in it. The first time, it was smiling. The second time, it raised one hand. I am not going back inside. But I don't think staying out here will save me either. Story 3. Meaningless. It's all meaningless. Life, death, love, grief, heaven, hell, prayers, funerals, last words, all of it. It doesn't matter. There is nothing waiting for us the way we want there to be. There is no warm light, no peaceful garden, no hand reaching down to pull you out of the dark. No one is coming to save you. I know I'm getting ahead of myself. I know this sounds like the rambling of a man who has lost too much in one day, and maybe it is. Maybe by the time you finish reading this, you'll decide I was drunk, grieving, insane, or all three. But my name is Wayne, and there is a rope in my yard that leads to nowhere. Today is Saturday, March 6th. This morning, I buried my mother. Liver cancer finally took her. She fought it for a long time. That was how she had always been. My mother didn't know how to give up. When doctors spoke softly and used words like progression and comfort, she would nod, smile, and ask what came next. When her skin turned yellow and her hands became thin and weak, she still tried to make jokes. Even near the end, when I could see the pain in her eyes, she kept telling me not to worry. That was my mother, always protecting me from things I could already see. The funeral was beautiful, I suppose. People say that about funerals when they don't know what else to say. The flowers were nice. The weather held. The priest spoke gently. My aunts and uncles came, some of whom I hadn't seen since my father's funeral years earlier. They hugged me too tightly and smelled of old perfume, wool coats and breath mints. My mother's friends all said the same things. She's in a better place now. She's with your father. She's in heaven, laughing at us for crying over her. They meant well. I know they did. They were trying to give me something to hold on to, some small, warm idea to carry through the day. And for a few hours, I held on to it because I needed to. On the drive home, that thought was the only thing that kept me from steering my car off the road. I imagined my mother waking somewhere bright and peaceful. I imagined my father waiting for her, younger than he had been when he died, strong and smiling. I imagined him taking her in his arms and promising he would never leave her again. That picture hurt, but it also helped. It doesn't help now. Now I am more afraid for her than I ever was while she was sick. By the time I got home, the sun had already dropped behind the trees. My house is small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen barely bigger than a minivan. It isn't much, but it's mine. The only real luxury it has is the back porch. The porch faces a small clearing at the edge of a forest behind my neighborhood. It's not a deep forest, not really, but at night it looks much bigger than it is. The trees stand close together, and beyond the first few rows, the dark swallows everything. I've spent a lot of evenings out there, smoking cigars under the stars, drinking coffee while the sun came up, listening to insects in the summer, watching snow settle in winter. That night, I wanted to drink. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and searched for anything that could make the pain quieter. I found a case of beer and decided that would have to do. I carried it to the sliding door, already imagining myself sitting on the porch until I either cried, passed out, or both. But when I opened the door, I didn't see fireflies, I didn't hear crickets, I didn't feel the quiet comfort of my yard. I saw a rope. It hung in the clearing a few steps beyond the porch, perfectly still in the moonlight. At first, I thought it was tied to one of the trees. That would have been strange enough. I live alone. No one should have been in my yard. No one should have been tying ropes to anything. I glanced around quickly, checking the edge of the forest, the sides of the house, the shadows under the porch steps. Nobody was there. I set the case of beer down and stepped off the patio. The rope was thick, maybe half an inch wide, and dark brown. It looked old, but not rotten. Rough fibers twisted together tightly. The bottom end hung close enough for me to reach, but when I followed it upward with my eyes, I realized something that made my breath catch. It wasn't tied to a branch. It wasn't tied to anything. The rope went straight up into the night and just kept going. Not into clouds, not over a roofline, not into some hidden pulley or wire, into nothing. "What the fuck?" I whispered. I walked around it slowly, staring from every angle. The moonlight touched the rope, so I knew it was real. It cast a faint shadow on the grass. It moved slightly when the breeze passed through the yard, though the upper end remained fixed in the sky. I reached out with both hands and grabbed it. The rope felt real, too. Coarse, cold, solid. I gave it a small tug. Nothing happened. I expected it to fall. I expected whatever trick was holding it up to fail. I expected to discover some fishing line or prank or weird art installation. Something I could understand, something I could tell people about later after enough time had passed for it to become funny. But the rope didn't move. It remained fixed to whatever invisible thing held it above me. I stepped back and looked up again. For reasons I still can't fully explain, the sight of it filled me with anger. Not fear at first. Anger. It wasn't supposed to be there. It offended me. It was like someone had hung a middle finger in my yard, pointing straight at the laws of the universe. My mother had died. My father was gone. My life was empty. And now the world was going to add this? A rope to nowhere dangling in my backyard like a joke? I rolled up my sleeves. I grabbed the rope again, this time with both hands wrapped tightly around it, and pulled. Hard. It didn't move. I planted my feet in the dirt and leaned back with all my weight. My hands burned against the fibers. My arms shook. My teeth clenched. "Still nothing. You piece of shit," I growled. "Why won't you move?" I wrapped the rope around my hands and pulled harder. The dirt shifted under my shoes. My shoulders screamed. And then, finally, I felt it. The rope moved. Only a little, barely enough to notice. But it moved. That tiny movement fed my anger like gasoline on a fire. "That's right," I snarled. "Fuck you." Then the rope slipped through my hands. I fell flat on my back, hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. Pain shot across my palms, sharp and hot. I cried out and curled my hands against my chest. But before I could look at them, the rope snapped back upward into its original position, and a bell rang in the sky. Not nearby, not from a church. From above, a thunderous, impossible chime split the night open. I clapped my damaged hands over my ears and screamed. The sound swallowed everything. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything else. The yard vanished into vibration. The trees shook. My teeth ached. Then the chime faded, leaving behind a thin, high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked around wildly, convinced something had exploded. A transformer, a car, a gas line, something. But the neighborhood was still. No lights came on in the nearby houses, no dogs barked, no alarms sounded. The rope swayed gently. Above me, far beyond sight, the bell's echo slowly died. "What the hell is happening?" I shouted. My voice sounded small in the clearing. Only then did I look at my hands. The skin was gone from my palms where I had gripped the rope. Not scraped, not blistered, gone. The top layer had been stripped away in raw red patches. The pain surged as soon as I saw it, as if my body had been waiting for permission to hurt. I hissed and stumbled toward the porch, needing bandages, running water, anything. Then I turned my back on the rope. Hundreds of thousands of voices screamed inside my skull. I dropped to my knees. The pain wasn't sound exactly, it was pressure. A flood of voices filling every corner of my mind at once. They were all different. Men, women, children, old voices, broken voices, voices too deep or too thin to belong to anything human. They spoke in a language I didn't know, but somehow I understood what they meant. "Who are you?" That was what they asked. Who are you? The question came wrapped in pain, confusion, and rage. "Stop!" I cried, clutching my head. "Please stop," the voices screamed again. "Wayne?" That one was different. That one sounded like it knew me. "It hurts," I shouted. "Stop it, please," just like that. I opened my eyes. I was alone in the yard. I stood shakily and turned in circles, searching the trees, the porch, the windows of my house. There was nobody, nothing, only the rope hanging from nowhere. Then the voices returned, quieter now. "You rang the bell. You requested my presence." I backed away from the rope. "What are you?" I shouted. The voices whispered together. "You called for my voice. You made a sacrifice. Now what do you want?" I looked down at my ruined hands. A sacrifice, the skin, the blood, the pain. "I don't know what you mean," I said. The voices grew louder, impatient. "We are everything. We are nothing. We are all. We are less. We are death. We are life. We are angel. We are devil. We are what you requested. You summoned us. You made the sacrifice. Ask your question." "I don't understand." The forest seemed to lean closer. The darkness between the trees deepened, folding over itself. I could feel something watching from every direction. The voices softened. "Would you like us to help you understand?" I should have locked the door. I should have never touched the rope. Instead, trembling and desperate for the terror to stop, I nodded. The bell above rang once. The sound dropped through me like a stone into water. "You have summoned us," the voices said. "You have suffered for us. So we come bearing knowledge in exchange for your suffering. We know all. We are all. We will give any truth you request for a small price." My breathing slowed. I hated myself for what happened next, because curiosity rose inside me. Not just curiosity, need. There was one question I had been carrying all day. One question every person asks after standing beside a coffin and hearing people talk about heaven like they have seen it. "Why should I believe you?" I asked. The voices moved closer. "Is that the truth you wish to know?" "Yes," I said. "Are you willing to suffer for this truth?" My blood went cold. I should have refused. But I had already watched my mother disappear into a grave that morning. I had already listened to people tell me she was somewhere better. I needed to know if anything they said was true. "Yes," I called. The voices sounded pleased. "Hold out your hand." I extended my arm. For one stupid second, I expected some sign, some vision, some proof written in light. Instead, pain tore through my hand. I screamed and fell backward, clutching my arm. My fingers curled inward as if every tendon had been pulled tight. The skin of my hand shriveled and split at the knuckles. Bone showed through in thin, white flashes. Blackness spread along the veins beneath my wrist. There was no blood. Somehow that made it worse. "What did you do?" I screamed, tears running down my face. "What the fuck did you do to me?" Then the pain vanished. The wound remained, blackened, twisted, and torn open in places, but it no longer hurt. The bell sounded again. The voices spoke. "Your name is Wayne, 43 years old, alone. Your father died from a heart attack. Your mother died from cancer. You live in this house. You drink to quiet grief. You lie to yourself because silence is easier than prayer." "Stop," I whispered. They knew. I didn't know how, but they knew. "I believe you." The voices waited. I stood slowly, staring at my destroyed hand. Then I asked the question, "Where are my parents?" Silence. The forest was still. "My parents," I said louder. "You said you know all. Where are they? Are they in heaven? Are they happy?" The silence stretched long enough that I began to hope. Then the voices answered, "Are you willing to suffer for this truth? The cost is greater for such a secret, a price you may only pay once." "Yes," I said immediately. The answer came too fast. I know that now, but grief makes a person reckless. Love makes a person stupid. "I am willing to suffer." "Help me?" Her voice came from nowhere and everywhere. It spoke in that impossible language the others had used, but I understood it perfectly. It was her. Not an imitation, not a memory. My mother. "Mom!" I screamed. "Help me, please," she cried. "I don't want to be here anymore. Please help me, please." Her voice cracked on the last word. I ran to the rope and looked up, then into the trees, then back toward the porch as if she might appear somewhere if I searched fast enough. "Mama, where are you?" Another voice broke through. "Help." A man's voice. "My father." "Dad?" I shouted. "Dad, where are you? Please come out. Please don't leave." I was crying so hard I could barely see. Their voices overlapped, begging, pleading, calling my name, asking me to help them. They sounded far away and right beside me at the same time, trapped somewhere with no walls, no floor, no light. Then the thousands of voices returned and drowned them out. "They are part of us now." "No," I sobbed. "They are not happy." "No, they are suffering." "Bring them back," I screamed. "Stop hurting them. Let them go. Take me instead. Please take me." "You have been granted your truth," the voices said. Their tone changed. It became hungry. "Now grant us your suffering." "No." "Bring them back." I grabbed the forgotten case of beer from the ground and threw it into the trees with all the strength I had left. The voices went quiet. For 1 second, the entire world held still. Then the case of beer came flying back out of the forest. It moved faster than anything I had ever seen. It struck the ground beside me and exploded, blasting a small crater into the dirt. Cans burst open. Beer sprayed over my clothes. Shredded cardboard and aluminum scattered across the grass. The voices screamed with hatred. "You're suffering." The force of them nearly split my head open. I ran. I leaped onto the patio, slammed through the sliding door, and locked it behind me. Then I ran through the house, locking every door, closing every blind, shutting every curtain. My hands shook so badly I could barely work the latches. Now I'm in the kitchen typing this. I don't know how much time I have. Every few seconds, I look between the curtains. Something is moving in the trees. Slender, pale, too tall. It sprints from trunk to trunk, always just fast enough that I can't see it clearly. It wants me to see only pieces. A long arm, a white back, a face with no features. It is taunting me. The rope has changed. It no longer touches the ground. It hangs about 6 feet above the grass now. The bottom has formed a noose. I know what it wants. It wants me to pay for the truth. It wants my suffering. It wants my voice added to the others. I can still hear my mother crying. She keeps calling for me. Wayne, she sobs, please help me. Sometimes the voices behind them laugh. I don't want to die. God help me, I don't want to die. But the bell is ringing again. Not outside, inside my head. Its pitch has not changed, but my prayers have. Earlier today, I prayed that my mother was somewhere peaceful. On the drive home, I prayed my father had been waiting for her. I prayed death meant reunion, comfort, warmth, meaning, now I am praying for ignorance. I am praying for the world to become small and false again, because I know the truth now. And as I look through the thin gap in the curtains, at the rope swaying in the moonlight, at the noose waiting patiently above the grass, I find myself wondering one final thing. Was the truth worth dying for? Or are some things better left dead? Story 4. I used to work at a Subway when I was in high school. That store, like a lot of them, was always trying to save money wherever it could. They cut staffing down to the bare minimum, and closing shifts were treated like an afterthought. We closed at 11 p.m., but they still didn't schedule more than 2 people for the night. And plenty of times it was just me. Looking back, it's kind of hard to believe they ever let that happen. I was a teenager, alone in a store full of knives with a register and a mostly empty parking lot outside. But that was how it was. They wanted labor costs low, and as long as nothing went wrong, nobody cared. There was also a bus stop right outside the store. The line came in from downtown, where there was a big homeless population. It wasn't unusual for people to ride the bus back and forth all day just to stay warm or dry, then get off at the final stop, our stop, late at night and ride back in the morning. So we saw a lot of the same faces, especially during colder months. Some of them were quiet, some were unpredictable. The main thing was that they were tired, and they were always looking for a place that felt safer than the street. Most nights, I could deal with it. I'd make sandwiches, keep my head down, clean the line, and count the minutes until I could lock the door. The scary part wasn't usually the people, it was the feeling of being alone with no backup, having to make judgment calls that adults should have been making, not a high school kid trying to get through a shift. One night I was closing by myself again. I did the usual routine, started wiping everything down, pulling food pans, checking the lobby. The place was quiet. The last few customers had come and gone, and that late-night stillness had settled in, where you can hear the hum of the coolers and the faint buzz of lights overhead. When it got close to closing time, I walked over to the front doors to lock them. I remember having that little burst of relief you get right before you turn the key, because once the doors are locked, you feel like you can breathe again. You're still inside, but at least you've controlled one thing. Nobody else can just wander in. I reached for the lock, then the door opened. A homeless man stepped inside as if he'd timed it perfectly, like he'd been waiting for the exact second I was about to close. I don't even know how to describe him without it sounding like I'm exaggerating. I remember thinking that even in my own head, my description sounded unreal, but it was what I was seeing. He was tall but extremely thin, like his clothes were hanging off him. The smell hit me immediately. Not just body odor, something worse, like sewage and old rot. His hair was long matted and streaked with mud. His clothes were torn and dirty. His skin looked rashy and scabbed in patches, like he'd been living rough for a long time and hadn't had a chance to heal. And then there was his face. He didn't have a nose, not like it was flattened or injured or missing at the tip. There was a hole where his nose should have been, surrounded by red scar tissue, like the skin had healed over badly. I had no idea what the cause was. Maybe a birth defect, maybe an accident, maybe something medical that got infected and never got treated. I don't know, I just know it was shocking to see in the bright fluorescent lights of a subway, and it changed his voice too. When he breathed or spoke, it had this harsh, nasal sound, except there was no nose. It made everything about him feel more unsettling, not because he was trying to scare anyone, but because it was something my brain didn't know how to file as normal. And I hate admitting it, but I was scared. I felt guilty for being scared because he was clearly someone having a terrible life, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who looks at someone struggling and reacts with disgust. But I was alone. It was late. He was bigger than me, and something about his presence felt unpredictable. Still, I did what I was supposed to do. Customer service voice, polite, professional, like everything was normal. I asked what he wanted, and I started making the sandwich as he ordered. The whole time, he was muttering to himself, not talking to me, not even talking clearly, just murmuring under his breath like there was another conversation happening inside his head that I wasn't part of. I kept my movements calm and steady, trying not to show that my hands were tense. I finished the sandwich, wrapped it, and slid it across like I would for anyone else. Then I asked for payment. He looked at me and said, very clearly, no. I blinked because for a second I thought I hadn't heard him right. No? I repeated, still trying to keep my tone neutral, like maybe he meant he didn't want chips or a drink. His expression snapped into something hard. He raised his voice and practically shouted, no thing! The word bounced off the tile and glass, and it felt like the whole store tightened around it. In that moment, all the corporate training in the world didn't matter. I wasn't about to argue with a grown man over the price of a 6-inch sandwich while I was alone at night. I wasn't going to be a hero over something that cost the store a couple bucks, especially when the store treated me like I was disposable anyway. So I slid the sandwich toward him and said something like, have a good night, trying to keep it calm, trying to keep it moving along, hoping he'd take it and leave. But he didn't leave. He walked right past the counter area and headed into the seating section. He chose one of the booths like he owned it. Then he took off his shoes, slowly, deliberately, and laid down across the booth seat like he was settling in for the night. My stomach dropped. A subway lobby at night isn't big, but when you're alone, it feels huge. It felt like the distance between the counter and the booths had suddenly turned into a space I couldn't control. I was behind the counter with the register and the prep line. He was in the seating area, comfortable, ignoring the fact that the store was closing. I walked out from behind the counter enough to speak to him without getting too close. I told him as politely as I could that we were closing soon and he'd have to leave. He didn't argue. He didn't answer. He just stared at me. The stare wasn't normal eye contact. It wasn't even angry. It was blank and fixed, like he was waiting to see what I would do next. Like he knew I didn't have any real power. That was when I felt the panic start rising. Not the dramatic kind where you scream. The quiet kind where your body starts planning escape routes. The kind where you think about how far you are from the back door, and whether the phone is close enough, and how fast you could run if you had to. I walked away and went into the back, telling myself I was going to handle it like an adult. I locked all the doors to the back area, not because that would stop him if he really wanted to get in, but because it made me feel like I had at least one barrier between us. Then I watched him on the security cameras. They weren't recording cameras, just live monitors. Another corner cut. They were basically there to make employees feel watched, not to actually protect anyone. I could see him on the screen, still in that booth, still not moving much, just lying there. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20, half an hour passed, he was still there. I went back out and tried again, telling him he had to leave. He ignored me completely, like I hadn't spoken. No response, no glance, nothing. Like he'd decided I wasn't real enough to acknowledge. I stood there for a second, feeling small and stupid and trapped. There wasn't a manager to call. There wasn't another employee in the building. There wasn't some magic policy that made a situation like that safe. It was just me and him. And the knowledge that I still had to close the store, count the register, and leave the building alone. I didn't know what else to do. So I called the police. Even dialing felt like admitting defeat, but I wasn't trying to win anything. I just wanted the situation to end without me getting hurt. I figured a police presence would be enough to get him up and out, and then I could lock up and go home. When the officers arrived, they came inside and started talking to him. I stayed in the back because I didn't want to be near him and I didn't want to be part of whatever argument might happen. From where I was, I couldn't hear what they were saying clearly. I could see some movement through the doorway, but not enough to understand what was happening. At first, it sounded calm. Then suddenly, there was a loud wham. Chairs scraped and knocked over. Something hit a table hard enough to rattle. The sound was violent and immediate. Like the store had gone from quiet to chaos in one breath. My heart jumped into my throat. I remember standing there frozen, listening, trying to decide whether I should run, hide, or do nothing. I heard shouting, officers' voices, commands, the rough sounds of someone struggling. A few moments later, the officers dragged him out in handcuffs. He was kicking and yelling, twisting like an animal that didn't want to be contained. His voice sounded even worse outside in the open lobby, raw and distorted by the way his face was shaped. He screamed and fought so hard that one officer had to keep both hands locked on him while the other cleared a path through the knocked-over chairs. When it was over and the door shut behind them, the silence that came after felt unreal. The store looked like a scene from a fight. Chairs out of place, a table crooked, little signs of violence in a space that was supposed to be harmless and clean. I stepped out, shaking, and asked one of the officers what happened. The officer looked at me differently then. Less like I was an employee who'd called about a trespasser, more like I was a kid who'd unknowingly avoided something much worse. He told me the man had thrown a chair and then tried to rush one of the officers with a large knife. The officer tackled him into the tables to disarm him. I stood there trying to process that. My mind kept replaying the moment I'd slid the sandwich over, trying to be kind, trying to keep the peace, trying not to make him angry. If I'd argued, if I'd insisted on payment, if I'd threatened to call the cops sooner, if I'd said the wrong thing at the wrong time, I didn't want to imagine how fast that could have turned into something else. Before they left, they ran his information. The officer came back and told me the man had 2 warrants for armed robbery. I locked the doors after the police pulled away and stood there for a second with my hands on the deadbolt, feeling the aftershock in my chest. People talk about scary shifts like it's about the cold, or the hours, or the boredom. But that night taught me something simpler. When you're alone in a place that isn't supposed to be dangerous, you don't realize how thin the line is between weird customer and you might not make it home. And once you've felt that line under your feet, you never stand behind a counter the same way again. Story 5. Look, I don't want to get weird about it, but my mom and I are close. Not too close. At least I hope not. Just close. My dad left when I was 6. I can't even pretend I'm angry anymore. They were kids. Mom was 15 and he was 16. 2 stupid teenagers who thought they were in love, and then I happened. A surprise they couldn't undo. Still, I'll give him this. He stayed through the toddler years, and if you've ever been around a toddler for more than 10 minutes, you know those years can chew people up. Tantrums, messes, non-stop crying. The way sleep becomes this thing you hear about but never get. My dad stuck around long enough to see me grow into a real little person. But by my 6th birthday, he'd had enough of what he called family life, whatever that meant to him. He and my mom didn't even seem to like each other anyway. Even when I was little, I could tell. The fighting was constant. Not just yelling either. I saw shoving. I saw hitting. I saw my mom cry with her back turned so she thought I wouldn't notice. I learned early how to listen for footsteps and slam doors and the kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. So when he left, it didn't feel like the end of something good. It felt like the end of something rotten that had been stinking up the house for years. After he was gone, it was like my mom and I made a pact. Not with words, just with the way we moved around each other. The way we looked at each other when the house felt too empty. She would support me now. And one day, when she got older, when she reached those years where people start to slip backward and need help, I would support her. That was our pact. Ours. Not anybody else's. And for a long time, she honored it. She packed my lunches and cut the crusts off my sandwiches, because she knew I hated them. She walked me to school even when it was cold enough to make your ears sting. She read bedtime stories until she was hoarse and I was half asleep, and even then she'd keep reading because she liked the sound of my breathing when I was safe. It was perfect. It was ours. She didn't let anyone else in. Not really. There weren't boyfriends coming around, no new dad trying to sit in my chair at the table. It was just me and her, this tight little unit against the world. She even made me the man of the house. Not right away, obviously. She wasn't going to let a little kid run around acting like he was in charge. But she made it clear in her own ways that I mattered, that I was important, that I was all she needed. When I was 16, she sealed it. It was such a small thing, but I can still see it in my head like it happened yesterday. She let me sip wine with her. Just a sip. Nothing dramatic. But it felt like a ceremony, like a door opening. Like she was saying, "You're not a kid anymore. You're with me now." We sat together, and she wore this silk turquoise robe she always wore when she wanted to feel pretty but didn't want to admit it. Her hair was twisted up into a messy bun, loose strands falling around her face. She smiled at me, tipsy, warm, proud. I remember thinking she looked like a movie star in that soft light. I remember feeling like I'd been chosen for something. And it wasn't even the wine that made my skin buzz. It was her attention. The way she looked at me like I wasn't just her son, but her partner in life, her teammate. The only one who hadn't walked away. She talked to me that night in a voice that felt meant for me alone. Her words came slowly, almost sweet, like honey. She told me she was proud of me, that I made her happy, that she wouldn't trade me for the world, that she didn't need anything else because she had me. I believed every word. When it was time for bed, she tucked me in extra tight. She ran her hand over my hair like I was a dog she loved, like I belonged to her in the simplest way. Then she kissed my forehead, longer than usual, and left my bedroom door open just a crack. The hall lights spilled in, soft and yellow, turning the darkness into something less frightening. That night I felt something I didn't know how to name. Pride, maybe. Purpose. Like I'd finally become someone another person needed. And I loved that feeling so much it scared me. From then on, I stayed at her side like it was my job, like it was my calling. I took her coat when she came in, even if she didn't ask. I ran baths for her and tested the water with my wrist first, the way you're supposed to. I cooked dinners, cleaned dishes, fixed small things around the house. I paid attention to what she liked, what made her laugh, what annoyed her, what made her quiet. I learned her moods the way you learn weather. I made it my mission to take care of her needs before she even had to speak them. And I played the part perfectly. Every morning, waking up in the same house as her felt like a reward. Like the world was handing me proof that I was doing it right. That I was earning her love by being useful, by being there. And for 10 years, she seemed to feel the same way. She'd touch my shoulder when she passed behind me in the kitchen. She'd tell me I was her good boy. She'd look at me with that soft smile that made my chest go tight. Like the only thing that mattered was that I was hers, and she was mine. Then things started changing. At first, it was little. The kind of little you can ignore if you want to keep living in the version of the world you prefer. She started insisting I sleep in my own bed. Not gently, like a suggestion. Firmly, like she'd made up her mind and didn't want to discuss it. I didn't like it. The house felt different at night when I wasn't close to her. It felt colder, bigger, like the walls had moved farther apart. I would lie awake listening, straining for any sound that proved she was still there, still safe, still mine. And then I started hearing things. Noises from her room at odd hours. Soft footsteps, the creak of her bedroom door, low murmurs that stopped the moment I focused on them. Sometimes a laugh, quiet and private, the kind of laugh she used to save for me. At first, I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe she was watching TV, maybe she was talking on the phone. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't let go. It wasn't just jealousy. It was betrayal, like someone had stepped into the space that belonged to me without asking. That's when I started thinking there was someone else, a new son in a way. Someone she was trying to keep hidden from me. Someone she thought she could bring into our home while I lay in my room like a dog locked outside. But there's no fooling me. This woman is my life. I've known her better than anyone since I was 16. I've watched her face for a decade, learned every twitch and smile and sigh. I can read her like a book. Did she really think I wouldn't notice? Did she think forcing me into my own bed wouldn't make me suspicious? Did she think I wouldn't hear the noises? Please. I started watching from my window, not in a dramatic way at first, just paying attention. Looking out when I heard a car pass too slowly, listening for doors. And then I saw it. A car parked down the street at the wrong time of night. A shape behind the wheel. Headlights turning off, then on again. The car showing up more than once like it knew where it was going. I saw it through my curtains and felt something hot rise in my throat. Why does he get to have a license? That part still makes me laugh in a bitter way. My mom refused to let me get mine for years. She always had an excuse. She said it was too dangerous. She said she didn't trust other drivers. But when she was being honest, when she was tipsy and soft and thought the world couldn't hurt her, she'd admitted the real reason. She was scared I would leave her, so she kept me close. She kept me dependent. She made sure I needed her as much as she needed me, and now there's this guy with his own car, his own freedom, coming and going like he belongs. Like he can just take what I built. I hope she's reading this. I hope she knows I know. I hope she understands I'm not stupid. But I know she isn't reading it. Because I can see her right now. I can see both of them. I'm standing where I can watch the house from the right angle, where the shadows don't cover the upstairs window. The light in her room is on, low and warm. I can see movement behind the curtains, two shapes close together, like they're sharing a secret. My hands feel too steady. My heart feels too calm. That's how I know something is wrong, because I should be shaking, and I'm not. I think I'm going to have a chat with her. Nothing crazy, nothing dramatic, just a conversation to clear things up. She needs to understand something important. He's not right for her. He's not real the way I'm real. He's not loyal the way I'm loyal. He's a fake. A home-wrecking imposter who thinks he can walk in and replace what I am. And I'm her one true baby boy. I always have been. I always will be. So I'm going to knock on her door, and I'm going to remind her of our pact. I'm going to remind her who stayed, who took care of her, who loved her when everyone else left. And if she looks at me with that same gorgeous smile she used to give me, the one that made me feel chosen, I know everything will go back to the way it's supposed to be. Because it has to. Because I can't live in a world where she belongs to someone else. Story 6. I'm 42 now, and I still can't look at a ceiling hatch without a cold, oily sweat breaking out along the back of my neck. My therapist calls it a lingering spatial phobia. I call it common sense. When you've seen the way a house can breathe, really breathe, like it has lungs made of pink fiberglass insulation and ribs made of 2x4s, you don't ever feel completely safe under a roof again. We moved to the Blackwood place in the late summer of 1994. I was 12, stuck in that awkward middle age where you're too old for toys, but too young for anything that feels like control. My dad had bought the property for almost nothing at a foreclosure auction. 60 acres of Nebraska dust and weeds, miles from the nearest paved road, the kind of place where the sky feels too big and the wind never sounds friendly. Fresh start, Leo, Dad said, slapping the side of our overloaded station wagon like it was a loyal dog. He was smiling wide, but even then I could see something strained behind it. Desperation disguised as hope. He needed this to work. He'd poured every cent we had into a fixer-upper because he didn't know what else to do. The house was a tall, narrow Victorian that looked like it had been pulled upward by a giant hand. The wood siding was sun-bleached gray, the color of skin that had been left too long in water. It had no neighbors. It didn't even have a mailbox, which should have been the first sign that nobody planned on staying there long enough to receive anything. As we carried the first boxes through the foyer, Mom paused and looked up. "The realtor said the attic is sealed off," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Dry rot. We'll need a contractor before winter." I barely heard her because the smell hit me the second I crossed the threshold. It wasn't just dust or old wood. It had a butcher shop edge to it, coppery and sweet, faintly metallic. Under that was the scent of cedar, but it was being drowned out by something heavy, sour, and animal, like a wet dog that had been trapped in a basement for a month. Dad was already acting like the place was ours, like we belonged there. "Leo, take Cooper and check out your room upstairs," he called. Cooper, our golden retriever, was normally a blur of wagging tail and happy panting. He'd jump up and lick your hands and lean his whole body against you like he couldn't stand being more than an inch away. But at the bottom of the stairs, he stopped dead. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He lowered his head. His ears flattened back, and a low vibration rolled out of his chest. Not quite a growl, more like a warning hum that made my stomach tighten. "Come on, Coop," I whispered, tugging his collar gently. The stairs groaned under my weight, but it wasn't the normal creak of an old house. It sounded wet, like something heavy dragging across a tarp. I froze with my hand on the banister, listening. Thump, thump. 2 heavy beats came from directly above, like someone shifting their weight on the floor upstairs. Then a dry clicking sound, like a fingernail tapping on glass. Click, click, click. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep going because I didn't want my parents to see me scared on our first day. Cooper followed, but only because I pulled him, and his nails scraped the wood like he didn't want to put his paws down. By 8 o'clock, the plains had swallowed the sun. The house sat in a kind of pressurized silence, buzzing faintly, like there were wires running through the walls that shouldn't have been there. We didn't have curtains yet, so every window was just a black rectangle, as if the outside world had been erased. I was in my new room upstairs, sitting on the edge of my mattress. The desk lamp cast long shadows over the cedar plank walls. The room looked ordinary except for one thing I couldn't stop staring at. The attic hatch. It was just a square of plywood in the ceiling, but it didn't sit flush. The latch was rusted, and there was a half-inch gap on one side where the hatch sagged slightly, leaving a thin slit of darkness. Skirt. The sound came again, sharper now. Not a drag, more like something carving slowly. I stood on my bed, heart pounding. As my eyes adjusted, I realized the dark knot in the plywood that I'd assumed was part of the wood wasn't a knot at all. It was a hole, small, jagged, and fresh. The edges looked chewed, as if something with tiny needle teeth had been gnawing patiently from the other side. I reached up, fingers shaking, wanting to push the hatch closed and make it click into place, wanting to hear a lock that wasn't there. Then the smell drifted down stronger, thick enough that I could almost taste it. Damp meat, rot, the kind that coats your tongue and makes you feel like you can't swallow it away. "Cooper?" I whispered, turning toward the door. Cooper stood in the hallway, half in shadow. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking up at the ceiling. His lips were pulled back, showing teeth, but he wasn't growling anymore. He was making a rhythmic, wet clicking sound deep in his throat. Click, 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 click. It matched the attic sound perfectly. Then a voice came down through the hatch, thin and whistling like air escaping a punctured tire. It sounded like my dad, but wrong, flat and mechanical, like a recording played through broken speakers. "Leo, take Cooper, check out. Upstairs." Those were the exact words Dad had said earlier. But now they were being repeated from above me, slow and careful, syllable by syllable, like something was tasting the sounds before letting them out. Above the little hole in the hatch, a pale shape shifted. For half a second, I saw a wet glint. An eye. Huge and gray, threaded with red veins pressed tight against the plywood. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. Then the ceiling didn't just creak, it stretched. I heard snapping like tendons tearing and the sound of wood fibers ripping as something heavy shifted its weight above me. It sounded like a wet bandage being peeled off an ancient scab. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of my room with a baseball bat I'd dug out of a box, staring at that hatch until the sun finally bled through the window. When morning came, the fear tried to shrink itself into something my brain could survive. Like maybe it had been a dream, a fever, first-night nerves in a strange house. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cedar. Dad was at the table already with coffee and a stack of blueprints, acting like we were in control of this place. "Dad," I said, my voice cracking before I could stop it, "there's something in the attic." It was talking. It used your voice. He didn't even look up. "It's the acoustics, Leo. Old Victorians carry sound. Wind catches the gables, vibrates through the cedar. It can sound like voices. It's called pareidolia. The brain makes patterns." "It wasn't a pattern," I whispered. "It was you. Leo, enough," Mom said, coming in from the porch carrying a box of mason jars. The move was already wearing her down. Stress had tightened her face. "We have enough to worry about. The pantry has a leak. The cellar smells damp, and Cooper is—" She stopped mid-sentence. We all looked toward the corner by the refrigerator. Cooper was backed into it like he was trying to crawl into the wall. His breathing was shallow and jagged. His ears were pinned flat. His eyes were locked on the pantry door with a glassy, primal stare. "Cooper, come here, boy," I said softly. He didn't move. Instead, he let out a sound I'd never heard from him before. A high, thin whistle, like air leaking out of him. Then we heard it. Slap. Slap, slap. It came from behind the pantry door, heavy and rhythmic like wet meat hitting floorboards. Mom took a step toward it, frowning. "Is the shelving falling?" "Frank, I told you those supports looked rotten." Then the voice came from the dark behind the door. "Leo, take Cooper, check out, upstairs." This time, Mom froze. The jars in her arms rattled against each other. "Frank," she asked, voice tight, "did you just say that?" "I didn't open my mouth," Dad said, standing so fast his chair scraped hard across the floor. A thin gray fluid began seeping out from under the pantry door. It wasn't like water. It pulsed, slow swell, slow retreat, matching the slap, slap, slap as if the house had a heartbeat. "It's a sewer backup," Dad muttered, but his face had gone pale. He grabbed a tire iron from the tool kit on the counter like it would make him feel capable again. Pipes vibrating, making, resonance, some scientific fluke. "Dad, don't," I said, louder than I meant to, panic breaking through. The slapping stopped. The pulsing fluid went still, the voice changed. It wasn't Dad's voice anymore, it was mine. "Dad, is someone up there?" I felt my skin go cold. Those were words I'd said earlier in the hallway, calling out when I heard a sound upstairs. Now the pantry was giving them back, stretching the S sounds so they hissed, like steam escaping a pipe. Dad reached for the pantry handle, then hesitated. He noticed the door bowing outward, the wood grain strained as if something inside was leaning into it. "See?" he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "It shook anyway. Air pressure. Vacuum seal in the crawl space. I'm going to nail it shut until the contractor gets here. We don't want the dog getting into whatever chemical leak that is." He didn't want to see what was right in front of us. He took framing nails and hammered them through the pantry door into the frame. Whack, whack, whack. As he hammered, I looked up at the kitchen ceiling and saw a single gray drop hanging from a seam directly above my head. It didn't fall. It retracted, it pulled itself back up into the wood like a worm slipping into a hole. The house wasn't just old. It was doing something. Threading itself into us, that night Dad turned the master bedroom into a bunker. He shoved a heavy dresser in front of the door. The three of us crowded onto the bed, trying to pretend we were safe because we were together. "It's just for tonight," Mom whispered. She kept staring at the ceiling fan like it might drop on us, just until the inspector comes. I lay between them with my heart feeling like a stone. Outside the door, Cooper wasn't scratching to be let in. He was pacing. The steady click, click, click of his nails on hard wood ran like a metronome through the dark. I must have fallen asleep around 3 a.m. from pure exhaustion. I woke up because the room felt too quiet. The pacing had stopped. I sat up slowly, careful not to wake my parents. Moonlight spilled into the hallway from the gap under the door. A shadow moved across it. "Coop?" I breathed. A soft, wet thud came from above us, my bedroom upstairs. Then, in the hallway, I heard the attic hatch shift. I crept to the door and peered through the narrow gap between the dresser and the frame. The hallway was washed in pale, sick blue moonlight. Cooper stood directly under the attic hatch with his tail tucked tight. He was staring up. The hatch was open. Something began to descend, not dropping like a person climbing down, but unfolding like something that had too many joints. The limb was pale and translucent, the color of a mushroom, slick like peeled skin. It was far too long, maybe 6 feet, and as it straightened, its knobby joints clicked like dice in a cup. There was no real hand at the end. There was a cluster, 5 needle-thin digits that moved separately like crab legs feeling through the air. They hovered inches above Cooper's head. Then a voice came down, gentle and perfect, like my dad praising the dog. "Good boy." The digits didn't grab him. They threaded into his fur. And then, this is the part that still makes my stomach turn even now. They slipped under Cooper's skin at the scruff of his neck as easily as a needle sliding through fabric. No tearing, no struggle, just entry, clean and wrong. Cooper didn't yelp. He didn't flinch. His eyes went wide and cloudy, and his whole body went limp like someone had switched him off. The arm began to retract. It lifted my 60-pound dog off the floor without effort. Cooper's legs dangled useless. His head lolled back. As he reached the dark square of the hatch, the arm didn't just pull him up. It folded him, not like breaking for cruelty, like compressing something to fit it through a small opening. I heard a wet crunch of ribs being pressed together, the kind of sound that belongs in slaughterhouses, not hallways. One of Cooper's back legs kicked once, a final reflex. Then he was gone into the darkness. The hatch clicked shut. The silence afterward was thick, like the house was holding its breath. I slumped against the door, trying not to make a sound. My chest hurt from the way I was breathing. I looked at the spot where Cooper had stood. No blood, just a perfectly round puddle of gray, oily fluid. Then, above my head, inside the ceiling of the master bedroom, I heard it. Click, click, click. The sound of Cooper's claws on wood. But it was coming from inside the attic. And then I heard a bark. Cooper's bark, happy, playful, the bark he used when you picked up a tennis ball. "Leo, come play." The voice was wrong. It had Cooper's tone, but the words were shaped like human speech. It was like something was wearing the idea of my dog, trying to make it fit. Morning came cold and flat. No birds. No friendly wind. Just a stillness that made everything feel staged. Dad moved the dresser first, straining like effort could make him feel normal again. He stepped into the hallway with that determined look people get when they decide the world is going to behave because they need it to. "Cooper?" he called. "Coop, where are you, buddy?" No collar jingle. No pause. Mom came out behind him, rubbing her arms. "Leo, did you let him out?" I stood in the doorway, staring at the attic hatch. It was closed, but the wood around it looked swollen, the ceiling planks bulging downward like skin over a bruise. "I didn't let him out," I said. Dad checked the kitchen, the porch, called out into the empty fields. When he came back inside, I walked to the spot under the hatch. On the floor, perfectly centered in a pale gray stain, was Cooper's collar. The buckle wasn't broken. The nylon wasn't torn. It looked like the dog had simply dissolved out of it. I picked it up. It was cold and heavier than it should have been, coated in a thin layer of translucent slime. He must have slipped out a window, Dad said, but his voice caught when he saw the collar. That doesn't make sense. It was tight. He didn't go outside, I told him, my voice shaking. Don't start, Leo. Not today. Then we heard it again. Ha, 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 the wet panting of a dog after a run. It wasn't coming from the floor. It came from the wall behind the coat rack, muffled, vibrating through the cedar planks like lungs were pressed against the other side of the wood. Ha, ha. Ha, Mom froze with her hand over the coffee pot. Is he in the walls? Frank, is there a crawl space back there? The panting stopped instantly. A second later came a soft, playful woof, the sound Cooper made when he wanted attention, followed by a wet, sliding noise that traveled up inside the wall, across the ceiling, and stopped directly above my head. Ha, ha, ha. It's resonance, Dad whispered, but he sounded like he was trying to hypnotize himself. Wind, vents, suction, something like that. Frank, Mom said, voice rising, that sounds exactly like him. The panting slowed. It deepened. It became heavier, almost guttural. Then the voice came again. Leo, come, play. It was Cooper's bark turned into words, and my own voice twisted into the shape of the sentence. A horrible mix, dog tone, human language, machine delivery. Then a long thump hit the ceiling. The whole house flexed. A seam in the cedar pulled apart, and for a split second I saw movement in the gap. Not fur, not skin like ours, but pale, needle-thin ribs expanding and contracting as if the house itself was breathing through them. Mom's voice cracked. We're leaving. Frank, get the keys. We're leaving right now. Dad didn't move. He stared at the pantry door, the one he'd nailed shut. The nails were turning. Slowly, like something inside was unscrewing them, backing them out of the wood with a high metallic screech. Scree, scree. One nail loosened, then another, until the last one dropped to the floor with a hollow clink. The pantry door didn't swing open. It sagged, held in place by thick, ropey strands of gray slime that clung like tendons. Keys! Frank! Mom shouted, panic breaking into full terror. Dad's voice went calm in the worst way, like something in him finally accepted the truth. Get to the car, he said. Leo, take your mother. Go. We ran for the front door. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't move. It wasn't locked. It felt fused, like the frame had been glued shut from the inside. The gray fluid had leaked into the seams overnight and hardened into something that didn't flex. The window! I yelled, pointing to the bay window in the dining room. We sprinted for it, and then the floor changed under us. Snap, snap, snap. The cedar planks beneath Dad's feet opened like wooden teeth. Frank, Mom screamed. Dad's leg dropped through, but there was no crawl space below. Not dirt, not empty air. Something grabbed him. I looked down and saw pale, multi-jointed arms, more than one, winding around his thigh like constricting snakes. Their joints clicked as they tightened. Dad roared and slammed the tire iron down, trying to break the boards apart. But the boards weren't boards anymore. Where the tire irons struck, the wood bled. Thick, dark fluid sprayed up, smelling like old copper and wet fur. The wallpaper got splattered, and the stains soaked in fast, like the house was thirsty. The house made a sound, not a groan. A whistle, high then low, 2 notes like breath being pulled through something narrow. Then the voices started, not one voice, many. From walls and ceiling and floor, our own words erupted back at us in layers, overlapping and broken. Leo, come help! With the kitchen boxes. Boy, it's just an old house. Leo. A dozen versions of us. All wrong, all mechanical, all hungry with imitation. Something pale surged out of the pantry. Not like a creature stepping into the room, but like the house pushing part of itself forward. a knotted mass of slick muscle and skin still attached to the wall behind it. It hit Dad with the force of something heavy and practiced. He didn't even have time to scream. Needle-thin fingers, 6 inches long, too many joints, threaded into the pores of his face. They didn't stab. They slid under his skin like they were looking for nerves, mapping him from the inside. Mom tried to lunge toward him. I grabbed her and pulled her back so hard she stumbled. Mom, look at his arm. Dad's arm, the one bracing against the floor, was changing. The skin turned gray and translucent. Veins darkened into something oily and metallic. He wasn't being eaten the way people imagine monsters eating. He was being taken apart and fitted into something larger. Go, Dad managed, and his eyes rolled back. The thing pulled. The sound was like a tree splitting in a storm. Dad's jaw fused to the floorboards as if the house was sealing him in place. His ribs arched under his shirt as his torso was dragged inch by inch into the opening. The last thing I saw was his hand still gripping the tire iron, and even that began to change. His skin spread over the metal as if the tool was becoming part of him until the iron didn't look held anymore. It looked grown. The window, Mom. Now. I grabbed a heavy dining chair and smashed it into the bay window. Glass burst outward onto the porch. I shoved Mom through first, ignoring the way her dress snagged on shards. She didn't even react to the cuts. Adrenaline had turned her into pure motion. I climbed out after her and hit the porch hard, then rolled into the dust. We ran to the station wagon. Mom fumbled with the spare keys so badly she dropped them twice. I turned back once because I couldn't help it. The house looked different. It wasn't a building anymore. It looked like a hunched shape, breathing slow and deep. The walls pulsed a steady inhale and exhale that kicked dust up around the foundation. In my bedroom window, a face appeared, pale and stretched. It had my father's nose and Cooper's wide, glassy eyes. It pressed its mouth to the glass, and even from 50 yards away, I heard that 2-note whistle, like the house exhaling. Mom got the engine started. We fishtailed down the driveway, tires screaming on gravel. As we hit the main road, I looked in the rearview mirror. The pulsing had stopped. The gray fluid retracted into seams and cracks. The sagging organic weight of the house stiffened back into straight lines and sharp edges. It returned to what it had pretended to be. A tall, narrow Victorian, quiet and beautiful in the morning light. The Blackwood place stood perfectly still against the rising sun, looking like a bargain again, like a fresh start, like a home, like it was waiting for the next family to pull in and believe they'd gotten lucky. Story 7. I was thrown into the utter commune by my mother. That is the simplest way to say it. She would have described it differently. She would have said we were called there. She would have said we were chosen. She would have said the world outside had become poisoned and cruel, and that the commune was the only place left where a soul could be cleaned. She always talked like that after she joined them. Everything became about purity, purpose, and belonging. But the truth was simpler. My mother was lost. She had always been that way, even before the commune. She was free-spirited in the way adults call themselves when they don't know where they belong. She chased ideas like they were doors to better lives. Meditation groups, cleansing diets, healing circles, people who talked about energy and rebirth and hidden truths. She never seemed to stay with one thing long enough to see what it really was. Then she found the utter commune. Or maybe they found her. They called themselves a family, a herd, a holy body under one divine mother. They believed that a giant mother cow had descended from the heavens to nurture humanity with the milk from her pure and everlasting udders. That was their whole faith. Or at least the part they told new people first. The cow was not just an animal to them. She was the source of life, the great mother, the divine provider, the udder above all udders. They said her milk could cleanse sin, heal bodies, strengthen families, and open the path to paradise. Most of us never saw her. We only saw the milk. Every morning and evening it was poured into our cups like a sacrament. We were told 1 cup was worth more than a human life. We were told spilling it was rebellion. Throwing it away was an insult to heaven itself. There were consequences for treating the milk badly. There were consequences for almost everything. The commune had layers of power. At the bottom were people like us, ordinary believers, families, children, workers, women with tired eyes, men with bent backs, kids who had been brought there too young to understand they had been taken anywhere. Above us were the utter leaders. They were the enforcers, disciples with shaved heads, white robes, and heavy hands. They watched us during meals, prayers, chores, lessons, and sleep. They carried wooden rods and sometimes metal hooks. If someone broke a rule, the utter leaders handled it. They called it correction. They called it forcing demons out of the body. Sometimes the correction was a beating. Sometimes it was worse. The utter leaders enjoyed blood rituals. I don't know how else to say it. They acted solemn when they did them. But I saw their eyes. I saw the way they looked forward to it. They believed cutting pieces from the body helped remove sin. A fingertip, a toe, an ear, something small enough not to kill you, but large enough to remind you forever. Above them were the otherworldly. They were the highest disciples, the chosen ones who claimed they had seen the holy cow with their own eyes. They said they heard her voice straight from her mouth. They lived in a mansion near the center of the property, though we were told never to call it a mansion. We were supposed to call it the House of Milk and Revelation. But it was a mansion. To us, it looked like a palace. The rest of us lived in shelters we built ourselves from trees we cut down by hand. We were not allowed modern tools unless the utter leaders approved them. We were told technology made people weak and full of outside world demons. We slept in bunkers, cabins, and long wooden dorms that smelled of sweat, wet straw, and old milk. Meanwhile, the otherworldly lived behind fences with clean windows, polished floors, electric lights, and real furniture. Their house had running water that did not smell like rust. It had a kitchen bigger than our whole sleeping bunker. It had guards at every entrance. Nobody questioned it. They were the cow's mouthpieces. That was what we were told. They deserved comfort because they carried the burden of divine speech. At the top was Dylan A. Andrews, the uttermost leader. That was his official title, and people said it without laughing. Dylan wrote the Holy Scripture we were forced to study every day. He preached every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday in the chapel, shouting until his face turned red and veins bulged in his neck. He told us who was worthy and who was damned. He told us the outside world was a pit of filth. He told us the cow loved obedience and hated doubt. If you did not believe in the cow, you were worse than sinful. You were empty. You were marked for perdition. That word appeared in almost every sermon. Perdition. He liked the way it sounded. He would spit it from his mouth like a curse, and the adults would tremble while the children repeated it in whispers. My mother believed every word. She divorced my father to join the commune. My dad worked on oil rigs, and because of that, he could not be around enough to fight properly for me. My mother got custody, and once she did, she used it to bring me into her new life. I chose her at first. That is the part I still hate remembering. When my parents split, I wanted to stay with my mother. I loved her more than anything. My father was away so much that he felt like a voice on the phone more than a person in the house. My mother was the one who braided my hair, made my food, held me when I cried, and told me stories when she was in a good mood. So when she said we were going somewhere better, I believed her. I did not understand that better meant no leaving. Once we arrived, I was packed into the back of a wagon with other children and taken away from her. I did not live in my mother's house. She lived with her new husband in one of the family cabins closer to the inner property. I was sent to the children's bunker for ages 9 through 14, which was one of the farthest places from her. I saw her only during approved visits, and even those were watched by utter leaders. She would smile when she saw me. She would hold my hands and tell me I was growing in the milk. She would say she was proud of me, then she would go back to her husband and her prayers and leave me there. That was how she loved me in the commune, by accepting me into the suffering and calling it salvation. I followed the rules mostly for her sake. In the commune, punishment did not always stop with the person who sinned. If a child disobeyed, the blood relative could also be punished. I knew if I caused trouble, my mother might suffer too. So I stayed quiet. I swallowed my thoughts. I learned to look faithful, even when I felt nothing but fear. Some children believed completely. Those were the ones who scared me most. They sang the songs with shining eyes. They memorized Dylan's scripture word for word. They corrected other children with a kind of joy. In school, we learned almost nothing useful. The teachers were random women who had been chosen to educate us because they were obedient, not because they knew anything. We copied scripture. We recited cow prayers. We learned the history Dylan invented for us. If we failed to listen, we were struck. If we questioned, we were struck harder. Once, I watched a little girl, maybe 7 years old, say the cow's name in vain. I don't even think she meant it as an insult. She was frustrated during a lesson and muttered something under her breath. The teacher heard her. The teacher did not hit her. She ordered the other children to do it. They beat that little girl while she curled on the floor crying, and the teacher told us we were helping cleanse her. I remember the sound of small fists hitting a small body. I remember watching children cry as they hit her because they were afraid to stop. I remember other children smiling. That was life there. Violence dressed as mercy, control dressed as faith. The labor camps were worse. Boys and young men from 15 to 30 worked the hardest jobs. Girls from 12 to 18 were also sent there, depending on what the other leaders decided. After girls became 18, they were given as brides to men chosen by the commune. They were told their sacred duty was to grow the herd. I was not old enough for that yet, but I knew it was waiting. My mother became pregnant with her new husband's child while I was in the bunker. After that, I saw her even less. She was ordered to stay in bed for most of the pregnancy. I only saw her walking once after her belly began to show. She looked tired but happy, one hand resting on the bump like it was proof God had forgiven her for everything. I became less important. I still loved her. That is the terrible thing, even when she left me in the bunker. Even when she praised people who hurt children. Even when she looked at me with soft pity instead of taking me and running back to my father. I loved her. I told myself I stayed quiet for her. I told myself if I survived, maybe one day I could convince her to leave. But no one left the utter commune. Not really. People disappeared sometimes, but never in the way escape stories end. If someone broke a simple rule, the utter leaders beat them. If someone committed a greater sin, there was a trial where the whole community voted on punishment. If someone did something truly unforgivable, the otherworldly took them away. No one knew what happened after that. Those people were never seen again. Then I got sick. Illness was common in the bunker. Children caught fevers, coughs, stomach bugs, infections, rashes. We lived too close together and cleaned too little with real supplies. Instead of proper medicine, we were given bitter roots, heated oils, and medieval remedies from the commune's apothecary. Usually, getting sick was just another misery. But getting sick at milking time was dangerous. That day, I sat on the long bench in the dining hall with my cup of holy milk in front of me. My stomach hurt badly. It had been twisting all morning, cramping so hard that sweat gathered under my arms. I told one of the women I felt sick, but she told me sickness was often a demon trying to avoid purification. So I sat there, the cup of milk was warm, it always was. There was a skin on the top that made me want to gag even before I lifted it. When the prayer ended, everyone drank. I forced the milk down as fast as I could. It coated my tongue and throat, thick and sweet and sour at the same time. For half a second, I thought I had managed it. Then my stomach clenched. I bent forward with both palms on the table and vomited. Milk came up in a violent rush, splashing across the wood, spilling over my hands, dripping onto the floor. The room went silent. Then someone stood so fast the bench scraped behind him. "Diseased," he shouted. I looked up, shaking. He pointed at me with horror on his face. "The milk has rejected her. She is unholy." "No," I tried to say. "I'm sick. I'm just sick." But others began repeating him. Rejected, unholy, diseased. The words spread faster than reason could. Hands grabbed me. I tried to explain. I told them my stomach hurt. I told them I hadn't meant to throw it up. Nobody listened. They dragged me to the House of Milk and Revelation. The mansion, I had never been inside before. The conference room they brought me to had gray rolling chairs and a shining glass table. Everything was clean and cold. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and leather. Two udder leaders stood guard by the door while I sat trembling in one of the chairs. I thought about my mother. I wondered if they had told her. I wondered if she would come. Then Dylan entered. In person, he was larger than he looked from the chapel stage. Tall, broad, well-fed. His suit fit him perfectly. His shoes shone. His face was calm in a way that made me more afraid than anger would have. He sat across from me, then leaned forward with both palms flat on the glass table. His hands left smudges on the perfect surface. "Did you throw up the milk?" he asked. His eyes did not leave mine. "Yes," I said quickly, "but I was sick. I didn't mean—" He held up one hand. I stopped talking. He had heard enough. "Follow me," he said. The other leaders pulled me from the chair. They led me through the back of the mansion and into the woods behind it. The air was thick and damp. Mud sucked at my shoes. Branches scratched my arms and caught in my hair. The adults walked faster than I could, and when I fell behind, they shoved me forward. We walked for miles. At least it felt like miles. Then the forest opened. In the clearing stood a barn bigger than any building I had ever seen. It was not tall like a skyscraper exactly. It was wide, so wide it looked like it could hold a whole town inside. The walls were metal, the doors were steel, enormous and thick, operated by machinery because no human hands could have opened them alone. My stomach cramped again. The doors groaned apart. We stepped inside, and I saw the cow. There is no good way to explain how large she was. Her body filled the barn like a mountain of flesh. She was slumped backward against reinforced walls. Her huge legs spread awkwardly, her enormous belly rising and falling in slow breaths. Her udders faced upward, each one larger than several houses combined. Tubes and pumps were attached to them, drawing milk through clear lines that ran into glass bottles and metal containers below. The smell nearly made me collapse. Barnyard filth, rot, sour milk, blood, waste. Something chemical underneath. It was like an outhouse and a slaughterhouse mixed together in hot air. Milk and bile rose in my throat. I vomited again, this time through my mouth and nose, but nobody cared. Stairs and platforms climbed the inside of the barn. Sky bridges crossed above the cow's body. Workers moved across them, poking, prodding, measuring, adjusting machines. Some wore robes, some wore lab coats. Some wore masks over their faces. The cow was alive. That was the worst part. Her ears twitched as flies swarmed in thick black clouds. Her eye rolled slowly when we approached the upper bridge near her face. Her black pupil was huge and slanted, glossy as oil. Her tongue slid from her mouth thick and wet, licking grime from her nose before pulling back in with strings of drool. Dylan stepped forward on the bridge and began to preach. His voice echoed through the barn. He spoke to the cow, but he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Great mother of milk," he cried, arms wide, "this child has rejected your gift. She has cast your holy offering from her body. Judge her, cleanse her, return her to purpose." The cow grunted. The sound shook the building. Metal trembled. Chains rattled. The pumps vibrated. I felt the noise in my teeth. I knew then that I was going to die. Before I could scream, Dylan shoved me. I fell from the sky bridge. For one terrible second, I dropped through hot, stinking air. Then I landed on the cow's tongue. It was enormous, slick, and covered in raised taste buds as large as furniture. The surface pulsed beneath me. Thick saliva soaked my clothes and hair. I tried to crawl, but the tongue shifted and threw me forward. The cow spat me out. I slid down the wet slope of its mouth and fell onto one of the massive udders. I lay there gasping, covered in slime, staring up at the bright lights and metal bridges high above me. Then something moved beneath the skin of the udder. A rope-like tendril slid out from a swollen opening. It wrapped around my ankle. I kicked and screamed, but it tightened like a snake. Then it pulled. I was sucked into the udder with brutal force. The world became red. I tumbled through a throbbing tunnel of living tissue. The walls pulsed around me, wet and hot. A river of milk rushed beneath me, dragging me deeper. The tendril pulled me through the current while I clawed at soft flesh, leaving no marks that mattered. Then the tunnel opened. I floated into a vast inner world of organs, membranes, and glowing cells. Everything moved slowly around me, suspended in a jelly-like substance that held me weightless. Tubes pulsed, veins shifted. Pale shapes drifted like jellyfish through the red light. For one moment, even through the fear, I felt awe. I was inside the holy cow, inside the thing my whole life had been bent around. Then the little cows came. I call them little because they were tiny compared to the giant body that held us. But in truth, they were the size of normal cows. They swam through the organ light toward me, their bodies pale and slick, their eyes blank, their mouths opening too wide. They hit me all at once. Their teeth tore into my arms, my legs, my side. I screamed, but my mouth filled with thick fluid. The sound became bubbles. Pain flashed everywhere. They ripped pieces from me and chewed with slow, grinding force. Chunks of my body floated away, pulled by currents into different organs, disappearing into the cow that had judged me. As they tore me apart, I thought of my mother, not Dylan, not the udder leaders, not the children who shouted unholy, my mother. I wondered if she knew where I was. I wondered if she would cry. I wondered what punishment would come for her because she was my blood relative. And then, just before everything went black, one final thought passed through me. I loved her so much that I had stayed. I loved her so much that I had died in the stomach of her God.